All right. Hey, y'all. How's everybody doing? Boo. Yeah. All right. Um, we're going to talk about what freight companies are getting wrong with AI today. And can y'all hear me okay? Mic okay? Volume? Okay. A little bit of miscommunication. We're covering a bit of what freight companies and freight tech companies are getting wrong with AI. So covering a spectrum here. I'm going to wait for a couple more people. I've got a question, but in the meantime, just introduction about myself, Metafora. I'm CEO of Metafora. We do consulting and IT services, 100% focused on transportation logistics. So our customers fall in three categories. Probably 60, 70% of the work that we do is with logistics transportation providers. So carriers, freight brokers, 3PLs, freight forwarders. Another 15, 20% is with shippers, retailers, manufacturers on their transportation and technology and how they manage their transportation providers. And then third category, freight tech companies. So we do work for TMSs, visibility providers. We also work with financial sponsors. It's just that it happens to be in the context of one of those three verticals. And then from a capability perspective, we do tech consulting, so system selection, system implementation. We do custom software development where we are building software on behalf of customers. And then we also do management consulting, process improvement, org design, op model, so on and so forth. All this to say, 100% of the conversations that we are having with customers now and have been for probably the last year touch AI. Every single customer is asking us, how does AI impact this business strategy? Here's where we want to be in 5 years. How do we think about AI? Hey, can I get a quick, the timer's not running. Do I still have 12 minutes or? Okay. I'll take as much, like I can fill air. I just want to make sure that I'm properly managing time because it's one of my weaknesses. One of many. Thank you, Ryan, for reminding me of that. But yeah, so just last thing, just we've consulted for hundreds of companies in the space, small 50, 100 million revenue freight brokers, all the way up to, we do a ton of work with companies like FedEx, huge spectrum of businesses. Every conversation is touching AI. And I'm going to talk today about some of the mistakes that people make with AI. I want to do a quick gut check of the room. How many people in here work at a freight tech company or are an investor? Okay, it's like maybe half the room. How many folks are here from shippers? Okay, we got a couple folks from shippers. And then how many actually work at freight brokerage, 3PL, carrier, kind of in the capacity space? Okay, about half. Cool. I just wanted to make sure that I'm tailoring the conversation a little bit. All right, so we're going to cover 4 things quickly on each. What are freight companies getting wrong with AI? The first is this assumption around AI model improvement. And I think either Ryan or Haris touched on this a little bit. One of the biggest mistakes that we're seeing is that people are building and implementing solutions, not assuming that the AI models are going to improve. And so Haris just talked about how at Augment, they run multiple models every time they run a task or a workflow. So they're building their solution, not using their own LLMs, but actually buying the deep tech LLMs and then building technology around that. One of the big mistakes that we're seeing is that there are some freight tech companies and there are also some actual freight operators with big tech teams that are building their own AI models. You're competing with Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in investment and data that you will never come close to replicating, that those models are being trained on. And Sam Altman has a great quote from an interview that he did at Harvard in the last couple of months, where he says that every time they release a new model or a new ChatGPT, a new OpenAI, they're killing startups because there are startups that are building, assuming that the model that exists today is the best that it's going to be, and they're building a ton of complex process and technology around that. So number one mistake, our number one recommendation, absolutely make sure that you are assuming that the models are going to get better, because they are, and they are getting better incredibly fast. Second one, underemphasis on business implementation. Harith talked a lot about change management. This is not new to freight or technology adoption and technology. I've done this for 10 years in the T&L space, 15 years for my career, and it kills me every time I see a freight tech company talk about how they can implement a new TMS or a solution in a couple months or even weeks, and big LSPs and operators just agree completely. From our perspective and what we're seeing with the AI companies, the AI freight tech companies that exist today, there's this huge emphasis on forward deployed engineers and a big emphasis on the technical implementation and not enough on the operational change management, which is partially how do you improve the process that AI might be automating for you, but also what needs to happen to the rest of the operating model of the business. Like we see way too much. We're just going to apply technology on top of what we already do, crappy process to begin with, but we're going to automate it to make it incrementally better, as opposed to like really taking a step back and thinking, how does this change what our business looks like? I believe fundamentally that 5 years from now, freight brokerages are going to look completely different than they do today. The job descriptions that you see posted online are going to be completely different. And I thought it was interesting how much Harith talked about kind of the parallel to coding and AI adoption and software development. I'm blanking on who said this, but someone who runs a big tech company has said, like, don't be afraid of AI taking your job. Be afraid of an engineer that's really good at using AI taking your job. And the same thing is going to apply to this space. Like a part of interviewing your operations team members should be, how are you using AI to make your daily job better? You want these curious thinkers and problem solvers in your organization evaluating how to use this new technology in their day-to-day and what the change to your operating model is as a result of that. That leads me into my third point, which is relying way too much on the customer. And this is something specifically, this is, again, not new to the AI revolution, but is even more impactful and meaningful in the context of the AI revolution that's happening right now. When the way that most AI is being implemented in freight tech right now, actually almost all of it, is you implement an agent, train it on how to take over a process or a workflow, and then let it do its thing. But when it hits an exception or hits an issue or runs out of its capability, that gets kicked back to the customer. That gets kicked back to an operator at the buyer of the technology. And what we are seeing is that the current freight tech providers, the current AI freight tech companies are over investing in the core agent technology and not spending enough on what to do with these exceptions and how do you manage the workflow and queue of those? How do you hand those off to an operator at the customer? How do you train those people on how to handle those exceptions? And then how do you get the agents to learn from how the operators handle those exceptions so that the core AI product actually gets better? This is an example where, from our perspective, like everyone's got their head in the sand. And as we talk to customers that have had failed AI pilots, because I think if I were to ask who here is an operator who's not running an AI pilot, I don't think anyone would raise their hand. Like everyone is running multiple AI pilots right now, and the ones that are failing are those that have too many exceptions relative to the cost of the product. And it's because they didn't organizationally plan for who is going to handle those exceptions and what's the process for learning from them. I think that this is the biggest thing this has been the biggest thing that we've seen lead to failure in tech adoption in transportation and logistics, is that, we have customers come to us and say, hey, we implemented Salesforce, but Salesforce sucks as a CRM. It's like, hold on. The world runs on Salesforce. How much time did you spend implementing it? How much money did you invest in implementing it? What are the changes that you made to your organization and the operating model? And how much time did you spend training your people on how to adopt the technology? It's the number one thing that we miss, and over again, these businesses underinvest. I think that we can all agree that T&L is a low margin industry. The operators are very cheap, and in my experience, I think that freight tech companies are willing participants when they smile and say, yep, we can absolutely do this implementation on your behalf. We'll take care of all of this. And then the results that are generated are misaligned with what the expectations were. That leads me to my last fourth point around siloed solutions, which is really, we are seeing kind of point solutions that don't see everything or have the right data to solve problems. And this starts with the integration and with the actual integration before the implementation and how you're actually looking at what's the data management strategy. This is something we've been talking about for a long time. I remember being at the BGSA conference, for those of you that have attended, a couple of years ago, and there were like 4 CEOs of huge freight brokerage companies on stage talking about machine learning and data science. And they're all talking about, well, we're using machine learning for pricing algorithms and for RFP responses. And I raised my hand and said, what's your data management strategy? And no one had a clean answer. The biggest miss that one of the huge misses that we're seeing in terms of preparing for AI adoption is, how are you cleaning your data? How are you organizing it? How are you making it available to actually make decisions based on? I hope that it is not news to everyone in here that if you're training models on crappy data, you're going to get really crappy results. That's not new with AI, but it is maybe exaggerated in the context of what's happening in the space. And so this idea around like, how do you clean the data that you have in-house? How do you integrate these new technology solutions in? I disagree with Harish's point around, siloed solutions and bits and pieces can't connect to each other. Like I don't think any of us want to go back to the SAP Oracle days where you buy like infrastructure and software all from the same provider. I fundamentally believe that a multi-vendor solution is how you win. And the emphasis should be on, how do you get all those different technologies talking to each other? How do you have a centralized master source of data that is the source of truth, that everything is correctly pulling information from, and that they're communicating to each other? And it becomes more of an orchestration conversation at that point, where you're not thinking about the individual solutions, but it's about how do they all work together, communicate with each other, and how are you orchestrating the freight and the workflow and the tasks that need to be done. So that, I've got 22 seconds left. Thank you for getting the timer right. That's kind of end of what I wanted to cover. I'll be here for the rest of the day. I think we've got a Q&A in about 25 minutes after a couple other folks go. But like I said, if there's one thing that I can leave you with, it is that AI is going to change the way that this industry operates, and we need to get it right. And from everything that I've seen after doing tech implementation for 10 years in this space, this industry is really crappy at adopting tech and actually driving measurable results from it. This is a self-serving message because that is literally what our business does. And I really want to emphasize the importance of investing resources into this. I think that you are better off not implementing AI at all if you're going to kind of dip your toes and try a little bit. It doesn't mean that you have to go all in, but if you're going to spend money and time and energy working on implementing AI, you need to invest money, or you need to put the right team and make it like an executive level commitment that you're making, and not kind of like a side project, which is where we're seeing a lot of folks fail in the space. So anyway, thanks for your time. Talk to you later.